It's April 21st here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with tariff talks between South Korea and the U.S. this week. The two sides will hold 2+2 tariff negotiations in Washington, D.C., involving both of their finance and trade ministers. The first such round of talks for South Korea since the Trump administration's 90-day tariff pause. Former Democratic Party leader Lee Jae-myung won the southeastern region's primary on Sunday, consolidating his lead in the party's primary for the June 3rd presidential election. Having held their first debate on the same day, the People Power Party will see its contenders cut down to 4 by running an open poll for 2 days from Monday. The 30-hour ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia ended with both sides accusing each other of breaching the truce. U.S. President Donald Trump says Ukraine and Russia will be able to do big businesses with the U.S. if a peace deal is sealed this week. South Korea's finance and trade officials are sitting down with their U.S. counterparts this week to hold the country's first tariff talks since Washington put its wide range of levies against its trading partners on hold. Acting President Han Duck-soo has made it clear South Korea will not be fighting but aiming for a win-win arrangement. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
South Korea will not fight, but try to make a deal with the United States over Donald Trump's tariffs as top trade officials meet in Washington this week. Seoul officials confirmed on Sunday that high-level consultations will take place, with Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok and Trade Minister An Dok-gun flying out to D.C. for a so-called 2+2 consultation. They will meet their U.S. counterparts, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, on the sidelines of the IMF World Bank spring meetings. The bilateral was first proposed by the US after the Trump administration decided to delay its reciprocal tariffs, including a 25% duty on South Korean goods. The wide-ranging tariffs were paused for 90 days after panic in US markets wiped out $5.4 trillion in just 48 hours. Shortly before implementing the pause, the US president held a half-hour phone call with acting President Han Duck-soo and ordered officials to prioritize deals with allied countries like South Korea and Japan, projecting optimism that a great deal could be made. In an interview with the Financial Times published Sunday, Han said Seoul will not fight the US over its tariffs, but hinted there could be concessions for a win-win deal between the long-term allies. He suggested South Korea could increase purchases of US liquefied natural gas and commercial aircraft, and that cooperation in naval shipbuilding could help America in strengthening alliances. Han further said Seoul could discuss non-tariff barriers, pointing to existing US concerns about auto emission regulations, farmer pricing, beef imports, and network fees imposed on platforms like Netflix. It's unclear whether the cost of keeping US soldiers in South Korea will be raised during the session. While Trump has indicated he'd like a one-stop shopping deal combining trade and defense issues into a single package, Seoul officials are prioritizing trade talks to tackle tariffs, keeping security matters separate. The government has described the meeting as a consultation, not a negotiation, signaling a measured approach. The agenda and schedule of this week's meeting are still being finalized. On whether the US leader might appear at the meeting in person, as he did unexpectedly during talks with Japan last week, South Korea's trade minister said Sunday that Seoul is preparing for such a scenario. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The Democratic Party held regional primaries in the country's southeast, where President hopeful Lee Jae-myung won by a wide margin in 2 regions. Now, the People Power Party held its first debate over the weekend ahead of a public opinion poll that will determine 4 candidates advancing to the second round. Shin Ha-young reports.
Both rival parties continued their primary races over the weekend. And there were no surprises as Democratic Party frontrunner Lee Jae-myung won big again in the regional primary, this time in the nation's southeastern Gyeongsang-do provinces after his earlier victory in the Chungcheong-do provinces. In the latest round of voting, 70.88% of the 130,000 eligible voters, including party members and delegates, took part. With the announcement made on Sunday evening, the former party leader strengthened his position as the DP's top contender, earning 90.81% of the vote, followed by Kim Kyung-soo with 5.93% and Kim Dong-yeon with 3.26%. The latest result came a day after Lee's victory in the Chungcheong-do provinces, where he won with 88.15%. Kim Dong-yeon beat Kim Kyung-soo to take second place. The party will announce the results of its primaries in the Jeollado provinces on Saturday and those for the Seoul metropolitan area alongside Gangwon-do province and Jeju on Sunday. Public polls accounting for 50% of the total will be held for 2 days between April 21st and 27th, with the final candidate confirmed on April 27th. Meanwhile, after 2 days of heated debates, the People Power Party wrapped up its first round of primary debates on Sunday. With 8 contestants, they broke the first round debates into 2 groups and topics: future for the young generations and social unity. Lee Cheol-woo, Na Kyung-won, Han Dong-un, and Hong Jun-pyo clashed in the social unity debate over issues including former President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment and his martial law declaration. Han highlighted the illegality of Yoon's martial law declaration, siding with the pro-impeachment side, while the others criticized Han for leading the push to impeach Yoon. During the Future for the Young Generations debate on Saturday, Yoo Jung-bok, An Chol-soo, Kim Moon-soo, and Yang Hyang-ja discussed foreign policy, AI, as well as Yoon's impeachment. During the debates, candidates also focused on promoting themselves, each claiming that they are the best option to defeat the DP frontrunner Lee Jae-myung. The party will conduct a 100% open poll for 2 days starting Monday, narrowing the field from the current 8 to 4 candidates on Tuesday. 신하영, Arirang News.
Former President Yoon Suk-yeol appeared in person for the second hearing of his insurrection trial on Monday. The Seoul Central District Court's trial began at 10 a.m. this morning, with the court accepting a request from the press to film the courtroom and the appearance of the former president sitting in the defendant's seat. It marks the first time that such footage is made available to the public since the trial began. While Yoon's side did not agree to the filming, the court made the decision with the public interest and people's right to know in mind. The 2+2 tariff negotiations in Washington this week will be critical for South Korea to find a breakthrough in Trump's reckless tariffs. Will the talks be the much-needed breakthrough or another setback? Let's turn to Dr. Young-sik Bong this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's start with acting President Han Duck-soo's statement. South Korea not fighting back against Trump's tariffs, citing South Korea's historical debt to Washington. What kind of approach is this?
Well, interim President Han Duck-soo wants to make sure that the talk will be productive and in the conciliatory atmosphere, but at the same time, the South Korea needs to protect its core national interest, according to a statement issued by Prime Minister Choi Sang-mo and the Minister of Industry An Deok-keun. So there is a split between Prime Minister Han Duck-soo being conciliatory toward the United States and other 2 main figures in the negotiation with the United States who emphasize that the final decision should be made not by interim president, but by the new president who will be elected 30 days before the end of the 90-day pause of the reciprocal tariff upon South Korea by the Trump administration.
Right, because the Finance Minister Choi Sang-mo has said that the government, he will not be rushing through the negotiations and leave it up to the next administration. Now, but South Korean team will be aiming for win-win scenarios for both Seoul and Washington. Now, talking about deals that can satisfy both sides, is this where shipbuilding and LNG come into play as leverage?
Well, shipbuilding, yes, because South Korea is the only viable choice for the United States to strengthen its naval power in response to the increasing military power of China, because South Korea is the only reliable partner to outsource shipbuilding for U.S. Navy. But LNG development in Alaska is only personal dream President Donald Trump. And it's a very risky business proposition. So South Korean team has no business to preemptively conclude that South Korea has to make concession for that risky project by the United States. South Korea needs to wait the business and the congressional moves with regard to the actual LNG development plan in Alaska.
Well, Dr. Bong, about the 2+2 meeting this week, though, which will take place on the sidelines of the G20 finance ministers meeting, why do you think the U.S. is expanding the agenda to include trade issues? Is it because the U.S. is possibly more desperate to resolve tariff issues?
Yes, the United States is very desperate. Think about it. It imposed a reciprocal tariff to almost 80 nations. And if you want to make a tariff deal with each of the 80 nations in the span of 80 days, then you have to take care of at least one country per day.
Right.
So Trump administration is on the defense. Time does not favor the Trump administration.
Well, time is ticking for Trump. Now, South Korean officials claim the upcoming talks will be about consultations, not negotiations. What does this mean? Why consultations and not negotiations?
Because consultation is not the same as a negotiation, because trade negotiations are subject to domestic laws. So all these government officials dealing with U.S. counterparts have a legal and political obligations to make report to the National Assembly for approval for the plans. And as I said, that in addition to that legal consideration, we are going to elect new president on June 3rd. So it is appropriate for the negotiators representing South Korean government to let the new president to review the interim agreement between Seoul and Washington and make the final decision with a reasonable amount of time, 30 days between the election of new president in South Korea and the expiration of the 90-day pause by the United States.
I see. Well, Dr. Bong, then tell us, what should South Korea aim for during the first round of, consultation this week?
Just listening, whatever arguments and proposal to be made by the Trump administration, including possible surprise appearance of President Donald Trump himself, as it did with regard to the visit by the Japanese negotiator to Washington, D.C. But remember that the purpose of South Korean team is not to make early agreement, but good agreement that is acceptable not only for the interim President Han Duck-soo, but also, and more importantly, the new president who will be in charge of governance for the next 5 years in South Korea.
Definitely. Dr. Bong, thank you so much for connecting with us this morning. You have a wonderful day. U.S. President Donald Trump said he hopes Russia and Ukraine will make a peace deal this week and join the U.S. to do big businesses, while the Kremlin says Russia will not extend the 30-hour Easter truce, with both Moscow and Kyiv accusing each other of breaching the ceasefire deal. Lee Jae-myung reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump took to social media on Sunday to express hope that Russia and Ukraine will be able to secure a peace deal this week. According to the U.S. president, if both countries are able to strike a peace deal, they will be able to do big business with the United States, which he says is thriving, and make a fortune. Trump's comments come despite his threat to pull U.S. support from the peace process if either Moscow or Kyiv stalls negotiation talks. Meanwhile, on Saturday, the U.S. and Ukraine both called on Russian President Vladimir Putin to extend his 30-hour Easter truce and impose a 30-day ceasefire, with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky proposing that Russia abandon drone and missile strikes on civilian infrastructure for at least 30 days. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Putin gave no such order, and the ceasefire came to an end at midnight Monday. Zelensky accused Russia of violating the Easter truce over 2,000 times, while Russia's defense ministry alleged that Kyiv had broken the truce more than 1,000 times. Lee Jae-myung, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. A joint large-scale air drill, Freedom Flag, is in full swing here in the country. The two-week drill this year is all about boosting joint response capabilities against various threats on future battlefields. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has this report.
Fighter jets fly through the air, making thunderous sounds. This as part of South Korea and the U.S.'s large-scale joint air power exercise, the Freedom Flag, at Gwangju Air Base. Held 2 times in a year, combining Korea flying training and vigilant defense, this over 2-week journey began on Thursday. Aiming to advance combined air power capabilities while improving interoperability between pilots from both countries, the 24-hour operating mission planning cell organizes the exercise for pilots to embark on their missions. Approximately 1,100 personnel joined the drill, and more than 90 aircraft, including unmanned aerial vehicles such as U.S. MQ-9, take part in the event.
This drill will serve as a chance to further strengthen the combined defense posture and enhance our joint response capabilities against various threats on future battlefields.
Another notable part is that the drill will also be based on complex scenarios against a high-level simulated threat involving an advanced stealth jet. This is a U.S. Marine Corps F-35B, one of the U.S. stealth fighter jets that came from Japan. Along with RK F-35As, these 5th-generation jets will play the role of Red Air enemy aircraft for the first time during the exercise.
By putting a stealth fighter, our most capable, on the red side, it gives our pilots, our air battle managers, everyone involved, a more difficult problem to try and solve. So by going against a capable threat, we're just enhancing our own capability through these missions.
By carrying out high-level air-to-air combat missions and working side by side, South Korea and the U.S. expect bolstered trust building upon the alliance. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News, Gwangju.
South Korean dried seaweed, also known as gim in Korean, has proven its global popularity, with its outbound shipments seeing a record high in the first quarter of the year. Now, it was especially popular in the U.S. and China. Our Moon Hae-ryun has more.
The exports of Korean staple gim, or dried seaweed, hit a record high in the first quarter of this year, driven by strong demand from US and China. According to the Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation on Monday, Korea's seaweed export value in the first quarter of this year reached $281 million, or around 402 billion Korean won. That is more than a 20% increase from the same period last year. Export volume for the first quarter also rose to 10,161 tons, up more than 7% from last year. Compared to the same period in 2015, this marks a massive 844% increase over the past decade. Monthly export growth rates compared to the same period last year stood at more than 7% for January, over 52% for February, and over 10% in March, according to the Korean Maritime Institute's Fisheries Outlook Center. With the demand from major overseas markets remaining high, the center is expecting to see the exports for this month to also exceed those of both last year and the historical average for the same month. By country, the United States was the largest importer of Korean seaweed in the first quarter, followed by China, Japan, and Thailand. The type of seaweed each country prefers is a bit different, though. Most of Korea's seaweed exports to China were in the form of dried seaweed, with 2,258 tons shipped, a whopping 97% increase from the previous year. Meanwhile, the U.S. remains the top destination for seasoned seaweed, with exports reaching 1,367 tons in the first quarter, accounting for more than 30% of total seasoned seaweed exports. The Oceans and Fisheries Ministry attributed such growing demand in China to the popularity of Korean dramas and films, which have sparked a kimbap trend and a surge in dried seaweed consumption. In the US, the popularity of seaweed snacks has pushed up demand. With both export volume and value on the rise, the government is expecting gim exports to hit its annual goal of $1 billion this year, 2 years before the original target date of 2027. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at some stories from around the world with our Ji. Good morning, Ji.
Good morning, Tommy.
So, Ji, let's begin with the second round of nuclear negotiations between the U.S. and Iran. Fill us in.
Sure. The U.S. and Iran have concluded a second round of nuclear talks in Rome on Saturday and agreed to hold another round this week. On April 19th, U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi engaged again in indirect talks mediated by Oman at the Omani embassy in Rome. The talks lasted for about 4 hours, focusing on reviving an agreement to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons while allowing for peaceful nuclear energy use. Both sides reported progress and agreed to begin expert-level discussions in Muscat, Oman, starting Wednesday, with a follow-up meeting scheduled for Saturday. Key negotiation points include how to handle Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium and how to ensure that the U.S. does not withdraw from any agreement. The U.S. suggests transferring the uranium to a third country, possibly Russia, while Iran insists on keeping it within its borders. The United States launched more airstrikes on Yemen's capital Sana'a and the coastal city of Hodeidah over the weekend. This comes less than 2 days after a strike on the Ras Isa oil terminal on the Red Sea coast. On Saturday local time, U.S. forces conducted 13 airstrikes targeting sites controlled by the Houthis Sana'a and Hodeidah, including an airport and a port facility. The airstrikes resulted in at least 3 deaths and 4 injuries. This follows an attack on April 17th on the Ras Isa oil terminal, which reportedly killed at least 80 people and injured more than 150 others. The U.S. military says these strikes aim to degrade the Houthis' offensive capabilities and protect international shipping routes in the Red Sea. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed on Saturday grave concern over the attack on Ras Isa and escalating violence in the region. Pope Francis met with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance for a brief meeting at the Vatican on Easter Sunday morning. During the informal encounter, the two exchanged Easter greetings and briefly discussed themes such as international tensions and migration issues. They had previously clashed over a few Trump administration policies, including the deportation of migrants, which the Pope called a disgrace. Vance held more formal talks over the weekend with senior Vatican officials, but the Pope did not participate. Later in the day, the pontiff briefly appeared at St. Peter's Square, marking his return after recovery from pneumonia, and delivered his Easter message read aloud by an aide. In Germany, the 37th annual Easter egg throwing competition took place on Sunday in the western town of Horhausen. Participants were given a single brightly colored hard-boiled egg to throw as far as possible without it breaking. The longest recorded egg throw to date is 78 meters, set in 2002. Eggs that remain intact are collected and distributed to the crowd, while broken eggs become bird feed. The tradition of Easter egg throwing continues to be a part of Horhausen's Easter celebrations, dating back to the post-Second World War era.
Things have turned much greener outside, and we're looking at a pleasant start to the new week. But it's another day with a big temperature swing, and it's going to be even warmer than yesterday afternoon. So many parts of the country, including Seoul, are set to experience their warmest day so far this year. Seoul and Chuncheon will reach a pleasant 26 degrees, Daegu and Gwangju at 25 degrees Celsius. The air should be nice and fresh all day with good air quality nationwide. Now looking ahead, we do have rain on the way. Rain clouds will start to gather over Jeju Island tonight and then spread across the country by tomorrow morning. Jeju could receive a summer-like downpours with up to 120 millimeters. South Coast could be seeing up to 80 millimeters of showers. The rain is expected to clear for most of us from tomorrow evening into the early hours of Wednesday. The early taste of summer warmth will ease off with rain.
That is all we have for this morning. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful start to the week.